Hey, welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Podcast. We are continuing on with our series, Becoming an Embodied Catholic Leader. We're going to be exploring ownership today, specifically through the unique design of the choleric temperament.
Yes, because cholerics like to go first. And so we're going to focus on the choleric first. We're going to give you guys what you want.
I will be your model choleric. Aaron will be coaching me, but we'll switch roles here based on a couple weeks in the future, sanguine and phlegmatic.
Yes.
So stick around if you're choleric or you are leading cholerics. This is going to be super helpful.
Yes, or you know someone who's choleric. You can always share this with them.
Everybody stick around from the choleric. See you in there. Better show up. Hey, welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Podcast. We're continuing on with our series on the Embodied Catholic Leader, and we're exploring how the choleric embodies this principle of ownership, this leadership principle that we have got here. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, let's talk about ownership.
Sure. And we're always going to be looking through the lens of unique design and mindset. Okay.
Yep.
Tell me, you said, let's talk about ownership. All right. What are the two things? We did a little bit of review of the last podcast.
Yep.
All right, so what are those two things, those two considerations that somebody must consider to own properly?
Yeah, I mean, you have to know first and own, which looks like acceptance of God's design for the human person. So that's thoughts. We have thoughts first. We get to choose our thoughts. Thoughts lead to emotions, which lead to actions.
Yes, when we don't own this, we end up blaming people for how we feel. That doesn't work, all right? We end up trying to manipulate other people's emotions, so we can feel that, because we think that something outside of us is causing our emotional state. It's not the case, okay? So when we own... Wrong, right? So we start to own the reality of how God has designed our bodies to make visible our own invisible interior life, right? The body alone is capable of making visible what is invisible in this interior life. We start to own that, we can start to own our thoughts rather than blaming other people and trying to manipulate other people to change.
I think this is so freeing. We train mindset coaches, and still it's like layers upon layers upon layers where people will go like, yeah, I mean, just this belief keeps coming back. And I'm like, and that belief is yours, and it's optional, and you get to continue to choose it or not, and you get to choose it right here and right now. And so this work is deep when you start to realize this, which actually brings us into the second portion, which is to own your property lines, own what is yours and what is not yours, and to own what is within your locus of control and release what is not.
Yes, I think this is the beginning of extreme ownership. You've probably heard this principle before, and that's just like, okay, if the team fails, it's your fault. If the leader, like, that's extreme ownership. And there's an element of, okay, well, that can go to an extreme where you're just creating an environment where people are able to abdicate their own responsibility.
Codependency.
And there's codependency at that point. So, but when you create a culture of ownership where people are owning their thoughts, owning their own emotional life, not blaming other people for it, or owning their own roles that they're doing, their own job, and they're not blaming other people, but rather they're looking at what's within their control, and they are stepping into the authority of where they actually have, like, where is their train? What's their little plot of land that they have to operate? What can they bring to the table? And they don't need to rely on somebody else at that point. They can always show up in that place of ownership. It's very empowering for the organization. It keeps them moving forward.
Yeah, and since thoughts lead to our emotions, which lead to our actions and our decisions, right? They are at the core of what we do. It's like the ultimate thing that we want you to own is this virtue of custody of the mind, because that's where it all changes. That's where all the movement happens. If you want to get to the core of it, go to the thoughts, go to what you are thinking.
Yes. Okay. So this is laying the foundation. This ownership principle lays the foundation for the next principle we're going to explore in later podcasts of influence. All right. Because if we do influence without ownership, it goes manipulative. Okay. So more on that when we get to the influence podcast.
Yeah. Another piece, sorry, real quick, because I just said we got to get to the root, and that's the thought. Another piece here is the unique design. So different temperaments have different thought patterns and reactions and inclinations. And so that's why we're breaking down this next series into these groupings of, we're talking about choleric today, the 4 temperaments. Next week we'll be talking about sanguine, and then, melancholic and phlegmatic. And how their natural patterns, their disposed, I guess, inclinations lead them to thinking certain things. Now, I'm going to take Matt through this today. So he's going to be kind of being coached today in front of you.
And this is what we're, so we got the choleric that we're exploring today. So it's specifically like we're asking the questions, how is a choleric leader inclined to abdicate ownership, right? What are some of those shadow sides of the choleric that can show up that abdicate ownership and go to blaming and some of those things? And then also, how is a choleric inclined to take ownership, right? And so for all you cholerics, listen up that want to embody this principle, because you want to be good influencers, not manipulators. Later on down the line, you want to be good leaders that gets the team on board, but also does it uniquely you, right? Based on who you are. Listen in. That's what we're going to be exploring today.
Yay. What
we're going to be doing on the podcast is we've actually got 2 examples that we're going to be walking through. And it's almost like a coaching session, right? Where Erin's going to be coaching me, but this is actually leaning on our workshop that we do. We have a leadership workshop for teams that helps them explore how they show up in their temperament, right? Specifically, this one is designed for leaders. We have one that's kind of a overall awareness of temperament and how you show up, but this one specifically is for leaders. And so what you're hearing here is kind of a little bit of a peek into what this workshop looks like, and how through this workshop you can help your team to embody this ownership principle. Okay,
yeah.
So we've designed it as such, but we're going to go through kind of some of the call it the triggers, right? We're going to start there with some of the triggers that are common to a choleric. We're just going to go through 2. I'll provide some examples of that. Erin will show where I am kind of inquire as to where I am abdicating responsibility or I'm not honoring what's within or outside of my property lines, right? So that we can ultimately come to a place of ownership, and then we can show up much more virtuously as we embody this ownership principle.
Great. Let's do it.
All right, Erin, what do we got?
All right. So Matt was looking at our worksheet that we have for everybody out there.
Yep.
And I said, pick a trigger that you find yourself like,
ooh,
okay, that you find yourself, I don't know,
triggered
leaning
by?
towards. Yes. Triggered.
Most triggered by.
Really, it's like, okay, so we have this list of triggers, and it's all different, like, what actually makes you feel the most powerless? What zaps you of your energy?
Where do you go reactive? And one of the ones that I circled on that sheet was others not pulling their weight.
Okay. Can you give me an example of this in your life?
I can. Okay. So going back to my Marine Corps days, I remember when I had got a new platoon and got a new platoon sergeant, and he wasn't really. He needed some development. Let's put it that way. And in my mind, he was not pulling his own weight. So this thought, he is not pulling his own weight, was definitely something that was coloring my perception of him. And when I reflect back now, how powerless I felt from this thought, he's not pulling his own weight, and how manipulative I acted later on. It was like, ugh, I didn't really like this.
You are coaching yourself right now.
I know. You can't.
So Matt, when you think the thought, he is not pulling his own weight, or when you were thinking that thought, he is not pulling his own weight, what emotion came up for you? One word.
Powerless.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, angry. There was an anger that was there, but underneath the anger, I could say was really this powerless feeling. Okay.
So when you felt powerless, how did you show up with him specifically?
I mean, the actions were like I was in a lot of convincing energy, but I was in that convincing energy was like I needed to show him how poorly he was performing. And so I was constantly looking for every small way that he was failing. Can you imagine how toxic an environment this was that I was creating? I was looking at all the ways that I would say that he was failing or falling short. I would talk to my first sergeant about him and like how it's like trying to campaign to get him on my side. I mean, I guess I could look back and say that I was setting him up for failure in some cases. In some ways, it was like I know I was going into certain situations where it was like, oh, I think he may fail at this. Let's just see what happens. And if he does fail at it, I'm going to come down on him. Like, we're going to sit down, counseling, formal, like bulleted everything that he sucked at. And then I'm going to like, he's going to sign it. I'm going to sign it, and we're going to file it away. It's going to be, I'm going to start building my evidence package for ultimately the fit rep that I'm going to write for him, which is like going to have an impact on his career. Like, and it wasn't like this malicious intent. Like, I wanted that, but it was more so like I wanted him to change. I wanted him to like be the platoon sergeant that I needed him to be too.
So almost like you were just trying to come up with ways to motivate him in a sense. I mean, obviously it's like, well, there's that tough love of like creating a very toxic environment, which is what you said.
Which doing. Is like, but it's also like the thing as I look back and I reflect on it, and maybe I'm coaching myself ahead here, Aaron, so you stop me. But I wasn't showing up in my gifts.
Yeah.
That's like another thing that was showing up in my action. Like, I wasn't being considerate of what was going on within him. I wasn't curious about what was going on.
You were avoiding your gifts. You were avoiding who you were. You were avoiding both of you.
Yes, it was painful. Like, I thought I needed to show up like this way and
to get him to change.
Yeah, to get him to change, because like I'd seen other leaders like, and this is the process that they were giving. Okay, if somebody's not performing, like, you can't just give them a crappy fit rep, because then if you don't have it documented, they can come back and they can be like, hey, they can kind of challenge you. And then next thing you know, it gets a little bit bureaucratic. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to do this by the numbers. We're going to do this by the book.
So pause. You just told me a lot of things.
Okay.
A lot of thoughts, a lot of actions, a lot of emotions that you felt. Now, looking back on this situation, what was in his locus of control?
Okay.
I mean, we know his behavior.
I mean, like, I know it's like his perception of himself, his desire, right? His image of what a good platoon sergeant was.
Yeah.
That was like what he valued. Certainly like his emotions and like how receptive he was to me or not. And eventually he was not very receptive. Those are some of the things.
And his actions.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah,
right,
like all of those things.
Oh, yeah. So then that's separate from you.
Okay.
Right? He comes in and he does his thing and he's like, whatever. He has his own thoughts, emotions, actions, decisions, values, all that stuff. And then you have a thought about seeing one of his behaviors, or you have a thought or a series of thoughts about witnessing what's within his locus of control. And that was, he's not pulling his own weight.
Not carrying his own weight. Like,
and
he's
then,
not willing. He's not willing to carry his own weight. Like,
he's not willing. Yeah. And that was leading you to that powerless, but also anger.
Yeah. Where it was like, okay, well, I am going to break your will. And it wasn't like, I must break you. It was like, I want to, but yeah, I can see where it was just like, okay. And I've seen this even bleeds over into my parenting style, you guys, where it's just like, okay, I see my daughter, she's got a will of her own. And it's just like, oh, I can be the stronger will here. Let me show you. Okay.
So let's go back to that thought. He's not willing to carry his own weight. Do you want to, like, would you want to keep thinking that thought after you realize where it led you?
No, because where it led me, if I'm just like on the outside looking in, I'm not showing up as a leader. Certainly not a leader that's invested in the development of his people. But rather, it was more of a sabotaging of this person and their career, and just being like, I was just so looking at the one side of things, and so yeah. Okay,
so we know what was in his locus of control. We know it was in your locus of control.
Certainly, my perception, my thoughts, my emotions,
and this thought specifically, this thought that was actually creating a lot of pain for not just you but him too. It was creating unnecessary pain.
Well, you see, even the powerless piece was like, I can look back and say, okay, I felt powerless. So what did I do?
You became angry.
I was angry, but I was also like pulling rank, so to speak. So I was falling back into that leadership. Remember we talked about leadership by noun? It was more of a positional leadership. And it's like, okay, you're going to sit on that side of the desk. I'm going to sit at this side of the desk. I'm going to give you your counseling. I'm going to slide it across to you. You're going to be like, begrudgingly sign it or don't sign it, whatever. I'll just mark it that you didn't sign it, and then I'll bring it to the first sergeant, and that won't look good for you. Like, it was a power play that I was stepping into, but it was not getting the results that I was hoping for.
And it wasn't you. It wasn't you. Like, some people lead that way, what you just described, and it's very natural for them, and they probably are effective at it.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't want to say there's one way or another. Like, some people are more stoic, and they're more like, oh, okay, so this is what we do, and and here's some advice. Or whatever. I
can tell you this. When there were times later on when I was in SBC, and I would sit down at Quantico, and I'd sit down with some of my lieutenants, and we'd do those formal counselings. The intention was different. It would be fine because the intention was like, I want to see you grow. Like, I'm telling you this because, and we're making this official because you need to know this, that this conduct, it has to change. Yeah. And so, like, this is me doing my job as your platoon commander, to letting you know, like, you have to be aware of this. I'm not doing my job. But here it was much more of a rubbing nose in it. I don't really believe that you can change. So we're just going to do this. Like, he's not willing to pull his own weight. He's not willing to change. Okay, well, whatever. I'm just going to do things by the book so that, I can say I did it.
I imagine that thought, I want to see you grow, never showed up in that situation.
No, Lord, forgive me.
Which is a great new thought, by the way, that you could choose, which is actually a great choleric thought, because cholerics love excelling and love growing themselves. It's like, I want to see you grow. Come on. Come with me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which is so much closer to who I am. Like, if I just
developing, yes.
Yeah, that's behind the development of the personal compass coach, the unique design coaching that we do. Piloted program. It's going awesome, by the way, you guys. We're like midway through it. So stay tuned for more of that personal compass work, or even the unique design coaching that we do, which helps you mine into who you authentically are. Okay, little plug, back to this.
Please. Okay. So moving forward, you could think that other thought, I want to see you grow.
Uh-huh.
Right? Yeah. And if you don't believe that, to do that deeper work, like, why don't I believe this, Lord? What makes this person different than these other people that I did want to see grow, right? What are the thoughts that I'm thinking that I can own and repent of so that I can move into this space of wanting to see this person grow?
Yeah, because why am I choosing despair? And I think I could answer that too. Like, why was I choosing despair for this person? Well, it was like, I just wanted to get rid of him because then I could get another platoon sergeant and things would be more efficient, right? I wouldn't have to spend my time and my energy like operating, like developing somebody at this point. But really what I was doing ultimately, I was actually creating more inefficiency without not having developing him. But eventually what happened is the first sergeant moved him, literally moved him, because the first sergeant could see this is not a fit. And so he ended up moving him, and I didn't have a platoon sergeant for a while.
Yeah. And
that sucked.
Yeah, right. So there you go, right? So you actually, like, the very thing that you were trying to save and protect, like your energy, your efficiency, your time, it became actually, it was
taken from me.
Taken from you.
Yoink.
Interesting. Okay, so you don't like where this thought is leading you. You could think another thought, I want to see you grow, and you could choose that. So, Matt, what contributions, if we were to look at our leadership temperaments assessment guide or chart, whatever you call it, what contributions would you want to create and give to somebody in this situation? If this situation were to happen again tomorrow, right? Somebody who works for you, it's like they're not pulling their own weight. You're like you caught that thought.
Yep.
What contributions could you lean into to actually create and gift to this other person?
Sure. Yeah, so this is where like my choleric and melancholic come together, because the choleric is like take action and kind of an extroverted talent, but that clarity from the melancholic side, I think, is something where you're really thinking through, right? And you're coming to a clear understanding of what's going on in front of you. that shows up here. And one of the ways I know I'm gifted uniquely is I can create clear goals, really clear goals. And that's important to any relationship here, because when you have clear goals and both people can say, yeah, we want that, you can pursue it together, right? Willingly. That's the foundation of a loving relationship, is when two people of their own volition choose the same common good, and they pursue it and they will it together even when it's difficult. So that's something that I could have done, make clearer goals, but also like very practical. And this is where I think the choleric is, because the choleric is often focused on executing and achieving. What are the really practical ways? So it doesn't say abstract, but I can give some real sound examples of, this is when I see this, or when you see this, this indicates some sort of growth. I could have really put together, I'd say, even a performance plan where it's like, okay, these are the things that we're looking for going forward. And then this is how we're going to come back and we're going to evaluate those. But again, I was so focused, I couldn't go there because I was despairing.
You were protective. You were protecting yourself.
Yeah, I was protecting
your time.
I didn't want to waste my time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is another kind of triggering thing for the cleric. I don't want to waste my time. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, I'll just, hand him a grenade, and problem solved.
Yeah, right. So okay. So some of the contributions that you were saying was clear goals, practical ways of moving forward. I also love this one because you picked this from the actual chart. Motivate him towards a worthy cause amidst struggle, and then thriving in a challenge. So like even just saying like, hey, let's find out how you're motivated, and like let's get you moving towards this worthy cause. Yeah,
and I think he was more of a phlegmatic disposition too. So even like getting curious about that unique design and being like, okay, yeah, like let's just embrace the discomfort of these things too. And so that's something where, like, as a cleric, I know it's an attribute of like, we're not really off put by discomfort. In some ways we like it because it just increases the merit of the achievement when you have to overcome something. But that phlegmatic personality is just like, yeah, I don't really like I don't like the discomfort.
Yeah. So I imagine like all of your feedback to him was like, so like he probably just kept going inward.
Yeah. It was getting more and more uncomfortable. Yeah.
That's interesting. So yeah, what ideal conditions would you create for this person?
So definitely clear goals, a clear performance plan. All right. Those clear expectations, clear boundaries. And I also want to invite him into this process. So it's not something that I'm just like putting on him, but rather like we're going through it. Hey, like, how is this hitting you? Or what are some ways that, like, inviting him into, like, what are your unique gifts that you can bring to the table?
I was just going to say that because that was kind of a moment of like, that was like a moment of shift for you, realizing what his temperament was.
Yeah.
And how he may have been receiving a lot of this stuff, and what that would do to maybe somebody with that particular temperament.
Right. Yep.
And so consider their temperaments and their gifts and their limitations.
Unique design.
Too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. All right. So that's example 1. All right. But we don't have just one example today. We've got 2. So Erin's going to crush me again, but don't worry. Same ones next week.
Matt, what is your trigger number 2?
Okay. Unclear goals. Unclear goals.
I cannot relate to this at all. Can you tell? Like, this is not a trigger.
What are you doing today? I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, right. Like,
I'll figure it out.
Wherever the wind may take me.
I'll figure it. No, I'm being a little lampooning here.
Caricature. But yes. It really, I'm not like triggered by unclear goals. I'm not like, I need clear goals. I hate
it. I hate it. The reason why I hate it is because if I don't know what the goal is, I don't know how to set my priorities. And if I don't set my priorities, I don't know what to be doing right now. And if I'm not doing anything, I'm not achieving anything. And I hate that.
Oh, so
no productive. All of a sudden I feel triggered by this conversation.
Yes. Okay. Anyways. So can you give me a recent example of this?
Okay. Yeah, I'd say that there came a point where with Virtual Catholic Conference, all right, we've recently taken that and it's now under a nonprofit. We sold it. It's under a nonprofit, and it really needed to go that way. For the best of the organization and for just serving the best of the mission there. But There was a time where our goal was very clear in the beginning. Churches were shut down. All these things were closing. All these speakers were sitting on their butts because all their gigs got canceled. And so it was a very clear goal of like, let's give opportunities to speakers. Let's help them to generate some revenue. Let's reach out to these people that are stuck in their homes and they still desire to be fed. And let's initiate this new.
You saw a need and you met it.
We saw a need.
Yeah.
It was very clear. The mission was very clear at that point. But as circumstances started to change, and speakers didn't necessarily have the issues with not having their gigs anymore, and they had their own online communities that they were starting up, and everything was opening back up, the mission was not as clear at that point. And so, the goal was not clear, I'd say, in that circumstance.
Okay, so what was the thought from that particular?
I don't know where we're going.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know where we're going. Mm-hmm. And then what was the emotion that came up for you?
Okay. Again, this powerless was there, but like on top of it was annoyance, which is another nuance of anger, right? Mm-hmm. So you can see this choleric anger, frustration.
Well, I think what happens is the choleric feels powerless, and then their response to the powerlessness is anger.
A powerful emotion.
Yeah, I think that's how it goes.
A facade of power with
yes,
anger. Yeah.
I think this is my response to this. This is what I do with powerlessness is I fight against it. I figure out a way. I just dig in my heels, whatever it is, you know? Okay, so what actions came from, let's just go to that powerlessness.
Yeah, I don't know where we're going. I kept looking for people outside of me to like tell me where we're going.
So you were like abdicating more power over
I was just like, okay,
counsel.
Business partners, like tell me where we're going. Constituents, attendees, tell us where we're going. Speakers, tell us where we're going. Anybody who shows up that wants to do a conference, tell us where we're going. Tell us who we are. And so, like, I kept waiting on like the market to share what it wanted, right? And so, and I mean, there's a good thing to that, to like listen to your constituents and see what they need. But there was just like I was ending up having more resentment.
Yeah.
At that point.
Well, you weren't doing it out of curiosity. You were doing it out of abdication. Like,
I want to get out of this powerless feeling.
Yeah, like tell me what I need to do,
so I can feel empowered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So you said you resented your team.
Yeah, I started resenting my team. Started resenting
the clients.
The clients, and it was just like
the market.
And so like here it was like okay, now I'm investing all of this mindset work to deal with the resentment, but I'm not going to the place of the source of it, which was this thought, like of this powerlessness thought, right?
I don't know where I'm going.
I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so curious though. Like, was it even true? Like that you don't know where you're going, where you're going?
Well, it was like, I know what I'm doing today, but I don't know what the problem was that we're solving. Again, it was very clear. And like, if you have a business, the business needs to be solving some sort of problem in order to be providing a value
right.
that people are going to pay for, right? And if it's a for-profit business, people are paying for the value that you're putting out. It's a nonprofit business, which is really what we moved it to. You have people that are willing to engage with your stuff, but it's funded by a different means, right? And so it's a little bit more. I don't want to say it's more mission focused, but it's just a different funding model, right? The nonprofit funding model, because we were certainly very mission focused with what we were doing.
Let me ask what else you were doing. What did you avoid doing? Did you abdicate any of your actions?
What did I avoid doing? I avoided praying about it, but like I avoided actually like sitting down and like actually saying like, well, where do I think we're going? Right? I avoided or sometimes I did that, but then there was other thoughts of like, now I got to solve this, and I would not involve my partners. And so I kind of like build a plan in isolation and go independent on it, which was also not helpful. And then it would go to this place of dependence where it's just like, hey, why aren't you on board with my plan? Like, I need you to be on board with my plan so I can feel powerful. Now,
yeah, so you would go from like that, like isolation, and then into like domination, and then, but like
No, I wouldn't say domination, but it was just, I would go independent. I would go independent and dependent.
But you just said, like, why aren't you part of my plan?
Yeah.
If you haven't even talked to them.
Yeah.
How would they know about it?
Well, we've seen this before where I will build plans in isolation and then be like, why aren't you on board? It's like, what's the plan?
Yeah.
You never really communicated it to us. And
you didn't tell us.
Yeah. And so all of this is like trying to,
avoid the powerlessness.
Avoid the powerlessness, but like avoid this, like even a deeper root of it is just like this fear of finding out that I don't know what I'm doing. And like, this isn't, which is super powerless because that's more like an identity level. Like, oh, I am out to lunch. Right?
I don't know what I'm doing.
And there's no fixing that.
So that's kind of like the thought that's underneath that. I don't know where we're going. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so, so that was the thing you were trying to avoid.
Well, it's like, I don't know what I'm doing and I need to know what I'm doing or else bad things happen. So it was like protecting me from going to that fearful place.
Got it. Okay. So, what was within your locus of control, and start with what was outside of your locus of control.
Okay.
In this
so
situation.
Like I couldn't control what. And
by the way, guys, locus of control is, if we go back to last week's podcast, are those two circles. So like what was what's outside of Matt's locus of control or outside circumstances, other people's thoughts, feelings, actions, all that stuff. What's within his thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Yeah. Okay. So outside of my locus of control, I couldn't control what COVID level people were in or the world was in, right? I couldn't control the fact that, that more speakers were getting more opportunities now. And in a lot of ways, I was very happy. That was the case, right?
Well, there was just a less need.
Yeah, that like this extreme swing over to virtual arguably by necessity or by circumstance was now starting to kind of level off. So I couldn't control just the market demand for the current business model that we were operating in.
Yes.
Okay. So I couldn't control that. I couldn't control the desires of, or even the thoughts, emotions, behaviors of my partners. Couldn't control the way that people responded to feedback forms. Couldn't control the way that speakers were responding to to our invitations, and couldn't control the fact that all right, now they want to be paid, or here are their stipends, or just the reality that the increasing cost of to put the events on.
So what could you control? What could you own?
I could control my own thoughts about the market, my own thoughts about where the business was going, my own desires for where I'd like to see the business go, whether or not I communicate those clearly to my partners or invite them to be a part of that. Or make suggestions, whether or not I dialogue with them. I could control
even where you are going, which is kind of funny because
this is the problem that we're going to solve. New circumstances. This is how we're going to pivot to solve this problem.
Well, that was the original thought. Was I don't know where I'm going, but like really, that's within your locus of control. Where am I going?
Yeah.
Right? And then invite others to maybe come with you.
Sure. Yep.
Which is kind of a great new thought, right? Because you said that before and I noticed a little bit of a shift. You're like, I never sat down and asked myself, wait, where am I going?
Yeah.
I was never intentional about that. It was like all this extra energy trying to mitigate the powerlessness, but like you never got to the core of what was creating that powerlessness, which is I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah. And it was something that I was certainly taking to prayer. Like even in that place of powerlessness, and it's not like powerlessness is a bad place to be. It's bad if you're putting yourself there, but often there are circumstances you find yourself in where it's just like, I'm not sure what to do here.
Yes.
And I just feel very powerless.
It's an invitation to prayer.
Bringing that to the Lord was very healing, but it was also that I can tell you from that place, it helped increase my trust, grow in faith, that the Lord was orchestrating something that I could not conceive or understand. And so there was, but but it doesn't mean that like I just kind of chalk it all up to serendipity and it's just like, okay, it'll all work out in the end. It's like, no, let's own what is ours to own.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're participating in the work of the Lord, not just passively, sitting in the canoe and, just
sitting on the roof of the house,
taking a nap while the current just takes you along. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's a really good balance to point out there where it's like when you bring it to the Lord and it's like, okay, where are we going, Lord? You and I. Yeah. Where are we going?
Well, even that, the prayer moved it from a place of powerlessness to docility. All right? Because the thought behind that permitted that docility or gave way to that docility was like, okay, the Lord is working something here. I don't fully understand it, but I trust him. And so there's a docility that was growing there.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Beautiful. So moving forward, like, if you found yourself back in this situation where it's like, I don't know where we're going, I don't know what we're doing, now reflecting on it, what would you do instead? What would you sit down and think or focus on instead?
Yeah, I would really get curious on especially if I'm feeling powerless. I think it's so good to get curious on like, okay, what is outside of my locus of control that I'm resisting the fact that I can't control it? Like where do I just kind of need to move to a place of acceptance? And quite frankly here, folks, that there's something very empowering about that. Oh, right. It may seem like the opposite, but it's like, oh, I can't control what you think. I can't control what's going on in the market. It's like, okay, like great. Then we don't waste our energy trying to control it. We just kind of surrender that. And then we say, okay, well, what can I do? And there's something that's very empowering about that. So, and it doesn't mean that we stop praying or we go bootstrapping or ungodly self-reliance. There's a way of being able to do this discerningly with the Lord. Because that's the ultimate goal. He's always trying to draw us deeper into relationship.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind.
Yeah. So that's helpful for you to know. What strengths and contributions would you lean on this time around? I mean, like if this happened again,
it's the same thing of like, I'd say being decisive. That's certainly a contribution that's on my choleric side where it's just like, and you can just be very pragmatic also, where it's just like, okay, yeah, let's just strip the emotion out of the situation.
Here's a new problem that needs to be solved.
These are let's just get the facts on the table. What are we going to do? So it's like, no, let's not like take the facts that kind of we have an emotional triggering to, and we don't really enjoy looking at those numbers. Let's look at all the numbers. Let's say this is the reality. Based on this reality, what are we going to do now? What are we going to go forward? What are we going to stop doing? So that but even all that needs to be kept in. Those decisions need to have a goal, a mission that we're moving towards. So again, getting clarity on where we're going is important to be able to answer that question. What do we do now in light of the circumstances?
Right.
Well, let's consult a goal. How would we go about accomplishing this goal in light of the circumstances?
I love that because you're starting to lean on your strategic. I'm thinking about all of your other strengths too.
Like Clifton strengths, yeah.
Your Clifton strengths, like your strategic, even restorative. Like here's this problem that is in front of us factually, and here are 5 different solutions of how to address this.
Yes,
and it's like you're making it less about you and like, I have to prove myself and know where I'm going and all times. It's like, oh, I am just a servant to this issue right now.
Well, that's even one of the things, what you just shared there. And this is one of those things like on our temperaments workshop, you explore some of your weaknesses. And so here we are, we're talking about these triggers. In this case, I don't know where we're going, or this not having a clear goal is a trigger for me. But what it did also is it thrust me into a weakness of my temperament, which is, I'm just going to go it alone. I'm going to take it all myself, and I'm going to solve the problem. And there's certainly vainglory that's built up into that, but ultimately it's operating in isolation. It's the opposite of leaning on the body of Christ.
Yeah.
Right. And so hence it's a weakness, and the Lord doesn't reward us when we operate outside of His design. Out of love, He doesn't reward it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, what ideal conditions would you have created?
Just like clear goal, business plan, Like we can say, okay, context, this is where we were. This is why we did what we did. Here's kind of the new reality that we're operating in. What does success look like going forward? And just like doing a clear business plan, I think is something that I love to do. Just having a clear expectations across the board, a clear plan of what like success looks like, but also like bringing people in and being like, okay, this is also what the cost of this new business plan is going to mean in terms of your own investment of time and energy. Yep. And do you have that to give? Like all of that coming to the table here as well. And just getting all so that we can ultimately make a decision.
I really like that, and I like that your strength is decisiveness, because I love this practice too as a coach. Is just to say, if this was a brand new product or a brand new business today, would I choose to do this again? Would I choose it as is right now? Would I choose this freely? Yeah. Knowing what was going into it, knowing all of the investment, all of that. And I think just giving yourself that permission to do that takes a lot of fear out of people, even who are entrepreneurs and trying to grow their business. Like, you have the option to pause and go, would I redo this? Or how would I reinvent this thing?
Awesome. Yeah. Cool, Aaron.
How do you feel?
I mean, I feel powerful. I feel good. Like this is it's being, aware of when that feeling of powerless shows up, and knowing that the anger and the annoyance is often the top level of really that powerlessness underneath it. But just going through this process of like, okay, well, like, let's just hold some space and accept the reality of what's not in my control. Yep. All right. So we don't waste our time controlling it. It's like, oh, Pope Francis this and blah, blah, blah. This is like, it's outside your locus of control. Stop. Doesn't matter. Like,
you can pray for him.
Yeah. Like, what's in your locus of control with it? Like, you're not going to like, anyways. Or like, what's outside your locus of control? Just accept it. Move on. All right. God is allowing this to happen. Like, that's something that's helpful in terms of acceptance. God's allowing this to happen. That's a mindset piece. So, and God is loving, therefore, this is for my good. All right. Somehow, in a way that maybe I don't understand, this is for my good. And that's an act of the will that starts to bring about more hope, right? It's like, Lord, give me some hope for this, so that He can infuse those virtues into us. So that awareness, but then also like that question of what is God in my unique design and how you created me. You've put me in these circumstances, and you're giving me the grace. Your grace is sufficient. We read it in Scripture. The dunamis, that power that you've given me, that you uniquely given me, that is you, not me, but it's like I'm a steward of it still. How do you want me to use this right now? And it starts to move us into this place of, okay, like stewarding well. Again, a leader's a good steward.
It's that relationship piece. It's that relationship that always comes first.
Yep.
And so,
amen.
Great.
Cool. All right, folks. So that was today. That's today's podcast. We just explored really how that unique design of the cleric will impact maybe where there's a resistance to accepting God's design, right? That thought, feeling, and action design that we have. Maybe they just kind of step outside of that and they go more to the blame, or they don't take ownership of that and what's going on in their own interior life. But also where they may feel inclined to grasp at control over something outside of their locus of control, which is not really going to lead to embodying this ownership principle. Okay. And we talked about some strategies that you can kind of go about to be aware of those things so that you can shift your focus back to what is within your locus of control, and you can really own what is yours, own the growth, apologize when you need to apologize, but be a better leader going forward, a better influencer going forward. Stay tuned on that. Cool.
So stick around. We're going to be doing Sanguine next week. I look forward to being the guinea pig.
Okay. Like and subscribe. We've got our certification that is right around the corner here as well. So check it out, CatholicCoaching.com. Learn how you can become a certified Catholic coach. So everything that Aaron was doing here today on the podcast, you'll be equipped to walk people through something very similar. Actually, exactly similar.
That and much more, actually.
And much more.
Yes. We did not go very deep, but we did it enough. And it was helpful.
We love it. And folks, we can't coach them all, but there's coaches out there. Or coaches that are waiting to become coaches that can really make an impact on our church by helping people be transformed by the renewing of their minds and taking authority over that unique design, ownership over that unique design that God has given to them. It's a great gift.
Amen.
Cool.
All right, guys, have a great week. See you
ya.
next week.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.